Hi there, this is a video for my grade 12 essential math class. Let me just grab a pen here and let's start talking about lesson 9, portioned assessment mill rate. This is the first of two lessons on property taxes that we'll be doing to kind of wrap up the unit on home finance. First, we need to talk about what your property taxes are. And the first thing we need to talk about is that there is something called municipal taxes. Municipal means the community you live in. So the city or the town that you live in is your municipal government. And your municipal taxes are paid to your local community. They're collected by the local municipal government and they tax residential properties. That would be properties where people live. That's like housing, apartment buildings. Commercial properties, that would be things like businesses, buildings that are there solely for retail purposes or to produce materials. Other businesses, again, it could be production of materials. It could be law offices, doctors' offices, or businesses. And yes, even farms pay some municipal taxes to their local community. So first things first, we have to figure out how we determine the amount of property tax that a town or a government is going to charge people. So what we need to find is what's called the municipal operating budget. And that's the money needed to pay for two things: infrastructure and services. So, the other thing, of course, that needs to be determined is the amount of taxable property that's assessed. And so basically the second one, the amount of taxable property assessed, that's pretty easy. That's just a matter of your government adding up all of the properties that are in their municipality. But let's quickly make sure that we understand what those two things are. Nobody likes to pay for property taxes, but we would really miss these things in our society if somebody didn't pay for them. Infrastructure, I don't have a whole lot of room here, so I'll put infrastructure things up here and I'll put services things down here. Infrastructure would include things like roads, bridges, sidewalks, and of course I'm talking about building new ones and maintaining and repairing the old ones, right? The money for those things has to come from somewhere, and within your local community it comes from your municipal property taxes. Sewer and water pipes have to be paid for and replaced and maintained. Natural gas lines, some of that is paid for by the actual gas company from Centri Gas, but some of it's also paid for by your municipal property taxes. After all, the wear and tear on those lines comes from the roads and the property on top of them. Also, they maintain things like parks. All right, somebody's got to pay to mow the lawn in the park and pay to maintain it. I think that's good enough for infrastructure. Then services. What are the services? Well, for example, services could be things like libraries and community centers. Those things are run on property taxes. Community centers. And of course, if you live in a community, I think it's with more than 10,000 people. I might have to look that up. You, of course, have to pay for your police services from your municipal taxes. Fire departments are run from municipal taxes. If you live in a large enough community to have a public transit system, that means buses. Of course, in even larger communities than Winnipeg, it would mean things like things like a subway or a light rail. Of course, you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, when I get on the bus, don't I pay for the bus by my actual bus fare? Well, actually, bus fare doesn't even come close to paying for the entirety of the budget for public transit here in Winnipeg. So the rest of it is, of course, covered by municipal property taxes. Okay, so there we go. There's the start of this lesson. Let's get to the math. What does it mean by a portioned assessment? Portioned assessment is a percentage or portion of a home's value that is taxed. You are not paying property tax based on the entire value of your home. You are paying tax on a portion of the value of your home, and it's usually around 45%. So the land, the portioned assessment, and the building's portioned assessment are calculated separately. So your building and the land that it's on have separate calculations for their portioned percentage that you pay tax on. Let's just get to an example. Joe Kerr owns a single-family residential house in Thompson, Manitoba. That should be two capitals there. There we go. The market value assessment of the land is $6,900, and that of the building is $67,900. Determine Joe's portioned assessment if the portioned percentage for single-family homes in Thompson is 45%. So, first thing we have to do is we should add those two things together. Again, the city came up with those two numbers separately. So we have to, of course, add them together. So our total assessed value is going to be $6,900 for the land and $67,900 for the building, which is equal to $74,800. Then my portioned assessment, which I'll just start calling PA if that's okay with you, is, as they said here, 45% of that, which again is pretty much normal for most places in Canada. You pay 45%, or basically you pay municipal property taxes based on 45% of what your building and your land is generally worth. So that would be $74,800, and that would make, for, I already punched buttons on this, it's $33,660. Okay, so what does the portioned assessment mean? It is the percentage, let me move that down so you can see better, of the home / property value that is being taxed. So again, you're not taxed on 100% of the property you own. You're taxed on somewhere around 45% of it. This is not how much you actually pay, thank goodness. This is how much this person here, Joe, is being taxed on. The actual rate of taxation, well, that's a little more complicated. We'll get to that in the next lesson. So it is, the portioned assessment is, to put it into a single sentence, the taxable portion, which means just piece of the property. Okay, so that's what portioned assessment is. Moving on to the next part of the lesson, mill rate. You've probably heard this before. If you follow the news and you're trying to find out, if you hear that property taxes are going up, you've probably heard that they talk about increasing the mill rate. What that means is the mill rate is the rate of tax per every $1,000 of relevant part of a home's value calculated by the municipality. So in other words, for every $1,000 of owned property, that's buildings and land, the municipality, the town that you're in that's calculating the taxes, has to calculate an amount that every $1,000 of property gets taxed by. For those of you who remember from your metric system, millimeter is 1,000th of a meter, so it makes sense that the mill rate is talking about every $1,000 of property. The mill rate is the total revenue required to run the town or the municipality, the neighborhood. It's the total revenue required divided by the total portioned assessment times 1,000. So in the last example, we figured out Joe's portioned assessment. Then the city or the municipality will go to his neighbor Fred and his neighbor Alice and all of the neighbors and all of the businesses, and they'll add up how much they can tax the entire town. They'll divide that number into the amount of money they need to run their fire department, their police, their libraries, their parks, fix the roads, fix the sidewalks, and then they'll times that number by 1,000. So 1 mil represents $1 of taxes for every $1,000 of portioned assessment. For example, the municipality operating budget requires $5 million to be raised from property taxes. So we're talking about a town here that realizes they need $5 million to run their town for the year. The total portioned assessment of all taxable properties is $252 million. Determine the property tax rate. So I'm going to use this little formula. So the mill rate is equal to, so the revenue required, they require $5 million to pay everybody and fix everything and maintain everything in their town. Their total value for tax purposes is $252 million. And then times $1,000. And my screen's frozen here for a sec. I'm sure it'll come back. There we go. And if you run that through your calculator, it's actually really easy to run this through a calculator. Can I point out that if you run this through your calculator, you don't have to type in all these zeros. Remember, the 3 zeros on the top cancel the 3 zeros on the bottom. Those 3 zeros cancel those 3 zeros. So it's really 5 divided by 252 times 1,000, which ends up being, I'll round it to 2 places, 19.84. And we actually call the unit on that mils, which again means that for every $1,000 of property you own in this town, you pay $19.84 per year. So suppose you were Joe from the last example. Joe had Joe had 33,600. So I'm going to go back to Joe. In example 1, Joe had $33,660 of portioned assessment. So $33,660 is how many thousands of dollars? Well, divide that by 1,000 and times it by the mill rate. And that would be his property taxes. Now, this is obviously a very low example. Most property taxes are quite a bit more than this. Divided by 1,000 times 19.84 is $667, and always round money to 2 places, 81 cents. There we go. So there is our first example from lesson 9. The second example is actually the second part of property taxes. Will be lesson 10, but these examples should be enough to get you through assignment 9 in your book. Some of you have probably already noticed at this point that I didn't do a lesson for 7 or 8. We're going to skip those. So your assignment is actually assignment 9, and you should be able to try questions 1 to 6 on this assignment. Thanks for watching, everybody. Good luck with the questions.